Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about two movies that I watched in the past week, or I should say rewatched, because I've seen them before. Mummy and its sequel, Mummy Returns. Now, I love a good pulp film. I loved the first three Indiana Jones movies, even though I realized that they were not all equally good. I even enjoyed The Shadow, which was, uneven at best, but had Tim Curry with the machine gun screaming at a ceiling, so how can you lose? And The Mummy, I thought, was just about note perfect as a pulp action film. It really nailed that genre incredibly well. It didn't hurt that Rachel Weisz is lovely and sweet and conveys that sense of innocence as this librarian who's now being exposed to the real world for the first time. And Brendan Fraser is just a wonderfully goofy, very physical, broad actor. The guy played George of the Jungle. You can't really take yourself all that seriously if you're going to play George of the Jungle, and he brought that to this movie. And it was wonderful. It fitted so well. The supporting cast I thought was excellent. The storyline was not what you'd call watertight, but it was still good enough for the genre. Pulp is not, it's not a murder mystery. It doesn't need every fact does not have to be perfect. And so overall, I thought that it was executed really well. And when I rewatched it this week, I did so with the commentary on, and it was kind of fun to listen to these notes, these comments from the creators. It was really quite interesting. And the difficulties of, filming in the desert, which I really hadn't thought about. I realized it's hot, but, sandstorms, it just didn't really occur to me that, you'd be trying to film and, oh, look at sandstorm. I thought that was something that I had never considered. And some of the difficulties they have with extras, just getting people to nail their marks, to listen to direction in a manner that helped them achieve their goals as directors and producers and actors, and how hard it was to get a lot of these people who were chosen because they had a certain look or because they had a certain background that really fit the role that they were being put in the film, but they had no acting experience. Now, I have no acting experience whatsoever. The last thing I did anything with the theater, I was a prop man. So nothing here that would help me be a better extra. So I can imagine it from that point of view. It's difficult, but when you're a director and you're a producer, you're trying to coordinate all these different people and all trying to achieve that goal. And and a little bit, it really did sound quite a bit like trying to herd cats. It just didn't sound like a lot of fun. And of course, the inside secrets. This set was, how much of this set was real? How much was it? Was it just a matte painting? How much was done at post-production as digital input? I found it fascinating. So I considered The Mummy to be a great time, and I recommend it highly to anyone that enjoys that kind of adventure. And yes, I freely admit it is like a low-budget Indiana movie, but who cares? It was still a lot of fun. And then we had the sequel, Mummy Returns. And this was a significantly weaker film. And some of it was because I think they tried to ride the wave of the first film. They tried to say, okay, we know people have bought these things from the first film. They understand them, they grok them. So if we just kind of extend them into the second film, they'll cut us a bunch of slack. And I don't think that they put as much effort into it. I don't think they crafted this as well. And there were things about the second film that I just found, even though it was a pulp film, I think they pushed what was acceptable, what was reality, a little too far. There's a scene where they had 10,000 horses, cavalry on this desert plain waiting to go into battle. And I can't think of any battle that ever had 10,000 cavalry in a desert. In fact, I can't even think of many situations where you would have had 10,000 cavalry, period. I mean, yeah, the Mongols would have had thousands of horses, but there would have been multiple horses for each person. So you might have had 3,000 cavalry and 10 or 12,000 horses because you had multiple horses that were traded out on a regular basis. So yes, that bothered me a little. It was logistically so unrealistic, it just didn't make sense. There was a silly airship in the film where it was supposed to transport them, and I kind of thought it was cool in some ways, but when I saw the film again this week, it was the first time I'd seen it since the theatrical release, it didn't go as well. It looked silly. The dirigible is way too small for what they wanted to do with it. The airbag needed to be about 4 times bigger, and it did things that dirigibles just can't do. And while I'm willing to bend my suspension of disbelief to a certain point, I think that they asked me to break it. And then there was a scene where they had to race to a pyramid that was in the middle of a valley, a depression in the desert, an oasis. And they had to get to this pyramid before the rising sun's rays struck the pyramid. Otherwise, there would be some horrible disaster, and one of the characters would die. There's a problem with that. The pyramid was in the middle of this depression. The sun crests the hill, and one of the first objects in that valley that is going to be exposed to sunlight is going to be the pyramid. It's the highest object in the place. It's in the middle of the valley. If you wanted to keep it out of the sun, you wanted to keep it into the shade, the shadow of the sun for as long as possible, you needed to put it in the valley, but against the wall. So as the sun rose up, the last thing the sun's rays hit was the pyramid. So it's like you're bending the very laws of physics to make that race to the pyramid be realistically, nerve-wracking. I think they could have found a better mechanism. I think they could have just rewritten some of the scenes so that it made better sense, but they didn't. And they could have just said, "You must get there before the shadow of the pyramid disappears," and that would have still been time-based. It still would have meant you had to run across the valley and beat the time before bad things happened, but it would have made a lot more sense. So there were things like that in the film that bugged me. I enjoyed it. I still had fun. I still enjoyed the commentary on this, just like I did the first film, but it was much weaker. Now, I haven't seen the third film. I don't know if I'm ever going to see the third film. If I find it really cheap, I might pick it up, a DVD. But I know that it's even weaker than the second one, so I'm not really looking forward to that. I like Brendan Fraser, but Rachel Weisz didn't show up for the third one, and I think that she smelled something, and it wasn't good.